Hi guys, it's Deb. Today I'm going to share with you how I make a succulent wreath. The wreath that we're going to make today is going to be a 1/3 filled wreath, just like the ones behind me. So firstly, I have a wreath here that is 30 centimeters in diameter. So I'm planning to have 1/3 of the circle filled. I also have dampened sphagnum moss. I need about probably 40 to 50 grams of dry sphagnum moss. And once it's dampened, I wring it out to make sure there's no water dripping. It's wet enough to use and it's not too wet. I don't want it dripping. To give you an idea, 40 grams, 50 grams of dry sphagnum moss is about that much in quantity. Now to do the wreath, you also need some tools. I need a nice pair of gardening scissors, a couple of different sizes of skewers. The pointy end and the pointy bit in the end is good for poking holes into the wreath so you can plant and set your succulents in. Also like to use the chopstick. I find it very sturdy to use, just nice and easy to poke holes. You also need jute rope. I think you need roughly about 3 to 5 meters of rope. You also need a glue gun with a couple of glue sticks. I also have a nice tray of succulents with a lot of varieties. And then that's all the material we need. We'll get right into it. So you get the moss and pack them onto the wreath. You pack and squeeze as you go and make sure they are tight and nice and compact. So pack and squeeze. As you add more moss to the wreath, try to spread it out as evenly as possible because we're trying to build a base that's even for the succulents to be planted on. Keep repeating the pack and squeeze action until you have used up all the moss. Once you're happy with how tightly the moss is packed onto the wreath, we now secure it with our rope. We wrap the rope around the wreath and tie a knot towards the end. Do a double knot so that it's very tight. Now I'll leave the tail end loose because we'll be needing it in a moment. Now wrap the rope around the wreath, going from one end to the other and all the way back. As you wrap the rope around it, you want to make sure you are doing it very tightly. So wrap and pull at the same time so it's not loose. Try to wrap around as evenly as possible, but it's okay if it's not perfect. As we finish wrapping, remember the tail end that we left out in the beginning? We just tie our rope to that little tail end and do a double knot to make sure it's very, very tight. And cut away any excess that you don't need. Now give it a good shake to make sure everything is intact and nothing falls out or fall apart. Now that's done, we're ready for the best part. You may choose to fill your wreath with succulents any way you like. Personally, I like to set the centerpiece out and work my way out. I've got a nice and large Aeonium that I'm going to use for centerpiece, so I poke a large hole in the middle of my wreath. I leave about 2 to 3 centimeters stem on my succulent cuttings and then plant it straight into the hole that you've just created. Because this is quite a large piece, sometimes it gets a bit too heavy for the wreath, so I use my glue gun to help secure it down. And I grab a piece of loose sphagnum moss to help pressing the glue down. For my next piece, I like to use a large succulent cuttings as well that is slightly smaller than the centerpiece, but with different color, shape and structure. Cutting away any extra length on the stem, leaving just about 2 to 3 centimeters. Now pick a spot where you want to plant your second piece and poke a hole next to the centerpiece and plant it in. Gently push and wiggle your succulent in place. Give it a shake to see if it's planted in properly. This one feels a bit wobbly, so I'm going to use the hot glue to help set it down. Now again, use the sphagnum moss to help push the glue in. And I just keep going and filling the wreath with different succulents. Shaking and checking along the way to make sure every cutting is planted in properly. Anything that's a bit wobbly, shaky, just use your glue gun to help set it down. Now in case you're wondering, and every now and then I do get asked the question if the hot glue will damage the succulents, the answer is no, they won't damage the succulents and they don't seem to be bothered by it. At each end of the wreath, I like to use succulents with longer structure. I think this extends the flow of the succulents really nicely. Keep going and filling any gaps with smaller pieces of succulents. Once this side is done, I then move on to the other side. Remember to keep shaking and checking to make sure everything is in place. This one is a bit wobbly, so I'm going to use the glue gun to help set it down. Keep going and fill up the wreath with succulents. Bear in mind to use different types of succulents, which makes the overall look of the wreath more interesting. And be sure to plant your succulents as close and compact as possible, because that will make your wreath look fuller and lush. Keep going and add more succulents. And more, the more the merrier. Again, at the end of the wreath arrangement, I like to use succulent cuttings that are longer in length and firm in structure, and I also like to use something that's different to the other end. This extends the flow of our arrangement up and outwards, and it makes the overall arrangement more playful and lively. Now the wreath is pretty full. Be careful while poking holes not to bump out those already planted cuttings. Gently wedge the succulents in and use your chopstick or skewer to guide the succulent stems in place. Once the end succulent pieces are planted, I now check for gaps where the moss is still exposed, filling those gaps with more succulent cuttings. Check every size and angles to make sure all gaps are covered and that you can't still see any moss. Look at that, it's so pretty. I really like the way it's coming along. Just a few more last gaps to fill and we're almost done. Well guys, there you have it. This is our succulent wreath completed. So one thing I find very important for a wreath to look nice is to have the succulents planted and set nice and close and compact. Leaving any gap doesn't look good, so I like to find a smaller size succulent to fill in any gaps that you can see. You want to make sure when you look at your wreath, you can't spot any sphagnum moss. If you can see any sphagnum moss, make sure you fill it with smaller succulent pieces. Also, another tip is that to make a nice wreath, it's good to have a good variety of succulents. I like different sizes, different shapes, texture, different colors. I think that a mixture of all these elements makes your wreath looks more lively, more interesting, give it a bit more personality. Once it's planted, give it a shake, make sure nothing falls out, then it's good to be hung up. Now if anything falls out or anything looks a bit wonky, just be sure to use your glue gun to help the bigger rosettes to set down so it doesn't fall off. Now in terms of caring tip, I don't have too much tip except to water probably once a week. They will last a long time in here. Just to give you an idea, this succulent wreath was made 12 months ago. So with those two up there, they were made 12 months ago. All I did was water it once a week. Haven't tried fertilizing it and it's been going fine. I'm sure if I give it a bit more care, it'll look much better. Now these ones are real fighters. They were made 2 Christmases ago. So they're about 2 years old. Same thing, I've only watered them once a week. And I've only watered them once a week, haven't fertilized them. Water and sunlight is all they get and they're still alive. Well guys, there you have it. I hope you liked the video today and I hope that gives you a good idea of how to start your own wreath making project. If you like my video, please give me a thumbs up and happy succulent wreath making. See you later.